Hello everyone, your favorite Night Owl here to talk about the concept of a mobile suit and to give it a quick review. For those of you who are interested, check out the link below to my Subscribe Star account, which is under DSR Verulven Pack. For just a $2 monthly donation, help a small creator out. Cool beans, cool beans. Let's get on with it, shall we? At its most basic description, the idea of a mobile suit is the concept of a bipedal, humanoid machine meant for military or civilian use. At its most basic form, it tends to only have thrusters for primary acceleration and deceleration, and using manipulated forces of moving the limbs to maneuver at the point. Essentially, a oversized spacesuit. Alrighty then, moving on. The military concept behind the mobile suit was of a mobile, highly maneuverable machine for use in the offensive role against enemy fleets. In the civilian role, it tended to be used for construction, although sometimes for guard duty, although that does tie closer to the military application. Early mobile suits tended to be armed simply with machine guns of the same caliber as a main tank gun, anywhere from 90mm all the way up to 200mm, depending on the franchise of Gundam you happen to be partaking in. Mobile suits tend to be depicted in land use as being fairly agile, although that is debatable when compared to other vehicles. Early depictions of mobile suits tended to have them being used in conjunction with other vehicles such as tanks in a military role and other construction vehicles in the civilian role, usually eventually taking over those roles nearly completely, although in the depiction of mobile suits they also tended to, when they replaced the role of the tank in their respective franchises, also would still be supported by lighter vehicles. Mobile suits tended to be further equipped with some sort of melee weapon to use against other mobile suits. The practical application of a melee weapon of that size is fairly limited, and even with prospective technologies in development in the real world, is highly unlikely to exist anytime soon, as is the concept of the mech, or in this case, the mobile suit, which is a depiction of mechs in science fiction, while a specific kind. Mobile suits design restrictions would also have to take into account concepts such as mass, as many tend to be anywhere from 15 to 20 or sometimes more or less meters tall. So 60 feet, sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more, and sometimes considerably more depending on the franchise in question. Mobile suits also tend to be depicted as having the same characteristics when it comes to mobility as a human in a suit. However, that is debatable, where the increased mass requires increased power in order to move even the smallest components, such as the fingers and the upscale to the arms. In the Gundam franchises, they tended to be powered by microfusion reactors, or some other advanced energy source that can fit in the backpack of these suits, or sometimes other locations. The closest thing in reality to something of that power scale is that of there have been some particularly small fission nuclear reactors that used direct conversion of thermal energy into electricity, allowing them to shrink it even further. Traditional fission reactors tend to be quite large. The concept of a mobile suit in the franchise of Gundam was dependent pardon, had a slip of the tongue, on the development of advanced energy sources. Although it is debatable, even if those energy sources were developed in real life, if they would make the concept of mechs of that size practical. As with the increased mass, you also have to take into account that as they are generally running on two legs, that is more weight on smaller points. Although there are some advantages to the general design of a mobile suit, such as being more capable in a wider variety of terrains than, say, a traditional tracked vehicle, although a particularly large tracked vehicle can handle much of what a mobile suit can do. Although, not necessarily, as the amount of weight behind even such vehicles tend to be completely astounding. A mobile suit can walk through a marsh that a tank can't. However, in theory, a 120-ton tank, or even something, say, as the Panzer Rat from World War II, which was 1,000 tons, should be able to do just the same. The practicality of such large vehicles, whether they be mobile suits or tracked vehicles, is very debatable. Armament-wise, build back to armament, a machine gun the size of a tank cannon would be quite the feat of development, but not impossible. Although, it would not be particularly practical, as yes, they would be particularly powerful weapons. However, they would in all likelihood wear out particularly quickly. Alrighty then. Many mobile suits are depicted as having shields. For example, the Zaku has its arm shield for defensive measures to improve its survivability, and the GM tends to have a particularly large body shield that it can hold out front. The GM shield makes more sense, although all that weight in the shields in the depiction of the mobile suit could have just been added to the body anyway to further improve its survivability. If you're going to add the extra weight in armor, might as well be on the main body instead of something that can be potentially dropped or knocked out of the way. Of course, the amount of power required is debatable if it would be able to make the mobile suit move quite as quickly and proficiently as it's seen in the show, and particularly in IRL format. The most powerful energy sources we have are basically ultra small fission reactors that use direct conversion of thermal energy and other methods. And they do not produce the same amount of power that a microfission reactor would be able to. However, even with the power of a small fusion reactor, you're simply potentially sitting in a two-legged bomb. So, I would not imagine there'd be too many pilots willing to pilot them. Although I may be wrong in that particular regard. Although, there have been attempted developments in real life of various nuclear-powered vehicles. They all tend to be particularly heavy, and on top of that, you risk irradiating the area around you when they detonate. The size of a mobile suit would also further hinder it in the regard of it being very visible. A particularly large, a 50-ton mobile suit would be a lot more visible than, say, a 50-ton tank. Many mobile suits would also, in all likelihood, be difficult to repair, expensive to operate, wear out quickly due to all the stress on the joints, and provide a fairly easy target. And a quick answer for those individuals looking to counter them would simply be an abnormally sized tank. However, the value of those would be fairly limited as well, despite how conventional they would be. Although the technologies that would make a mobile suit practical enough to potentially build en masse would also make such vehicles, such as a disproportionately sized tank, also fairly practical. although not necessarily desirable due to cost of upkeep. In fact, it can be argued that a Panzer Rat, built with modern technologies, including armor, a 1,000-ton tank would be better than a 1,000-ton mobile suit. In fact, it'd probably be easier to build. The idea of a land ship would also probably be a more conventional design that would benefit from the technologies that are going into mobile suits in the franchise, such as ultra-compact, high-energy reactors, whether they be fission or fusion, although fission's the most likely IRL choice. Although fusion reactors might be around the corner and can use some of the same technologies that have aided in miniaturizing fission reactors. Alrighty then, in space, the practical value of a mobile suit does go up. However, there would be considerably more efficient designs that would be relatively cheap and easy to build. Regardless of how you look at it, mobile suits would be insanely expensive compared to more conventional vehicles, even in a time when mobile suits would be a fairly practical investment. A mobile suit will always be more cost-effective than, say, another option that might be available, which we'll have a later video. Although a tank of similar weight would probably be a better option for the majority of participants involved. The technologies that let you even now boost the rate of fire of larger and larger cannon negate the advantages of having an automatic weapon the size of a tank gun when it comes to caliber. A 90mm tank with an autoloader can fire fairly quickly. So, why do you need a particularly large machine gun that fires 90mm shells when you can do something similar with a more conventional vehicle? However, that's not to say mobile suits wouldn't eventually be a reasonable choice for those who would be interested in building them. Although the question is, would that individual want to with more conventional designs available? However, a mobile suit should not, in my opinion, be compared in ground combat roles to a tank, as each would fill their own roles. And if one participant has a tank and a mobile suit, and the other side can afford a tank and a mobile suit, you could potentially see both sides developing both technologies in tandem. In fact, they could be potentially very complementary to one another, as even in many Gundam franchises, you see them both being used in concert by the various powers that use them. As a space tool, mobile suits would be a fairly more practical choice than, say, as a ground vehicle. Although there are some limitations to any potential technology. Many of the technologies that go into the potential of a mobile suit might be considerably far in its development from current day. With current technologies, we could potentially build one, although they'd be insanely expensive, and more conventional options would probably be far better. Thank you for your time. Like, share, and subscribe. Check out my BitChute account and my YouTube if interested. $2 monthly donation to help a small creator out on Subscribestar, which is under DSR Revolving Pack. Thank you for your time, and see everyone around.